Yo, what's up? It's your boy Sideshow, and if you're a big fan of NA Valorant like I am, then my god, look away now, because this was disgusting. I'm just gonna be basically roasting TSM during this video, honestly, because I thought that their play during the PAX Invitational was really poor, and I think that they haven't quite kept ahead of the meta in the same way that they should have done. Or maybe I mean, it's somewhat meta, but it's also just like general strategy. But also a lot of their default stuff was just way off in this tournament. And I want to point towards this match against Envy as an example, because Envy, formerly Together We Are Terrific, they're a good team. They were like the best amateur team before they got signed to Envy. But they're not supposed to be on TSM's level. And they kind of beasted them here on defense of Haven. And I don't think that they should have done. So what mistakes were TSM making? They were walking into warps repeatedly. And then Envy did exactly the same thing on their half. So it was just some garbage gameplay coming out from both teams. And I want to try and illustrate utilizing the kind of breakdowns that I've done before of great utility usage to push out Opers. This is a good example of teams doing that badly. And I want to try and contrast the two to showcase why Jet and Phoenix I don't think is the best idea, even though the NA teams have been playing a lot of it for a while on Haven. And also what you can do when you are playing those heroes to effectively challenge AWPers. There's been a lot of talk about the AWP meta, and I don't think that it's that valid when it comes to the top pro level, although it has been prevalent in North America. So let's take a look. It's round 7. We're going to jump in right here. Both teams have AWPs. It's a double AWP setup from Mummy and Calypso. This is Team Envy. They're defending on Haven. And Mummy's going to hold A long. And this is going to be the pretty similar setup to what we saw and what I was breaking down during the C9 Sentinels game, where they're holding with the AWPer and the Phoenix. So once we go back to their point of view, you'll see that Caboose is pushing up, down A long. He's trying to get into this corner position while Mame holds the angle, and he's just going to hold this angle here, and so anybody that pushes around to try and fight Caboose is going to get slaughtered by the AWP. That's the general idea, and I've illustrated a lot of ways that Sentinels and C9 had counterplays to be able to try and break that on either side, but this is much more of like the default of how TSM like to play, and Envy are a team that likes to copy what TSM are doing for the most part, I think. Now, Caboose is looking at the wall here because he doesn't want to get flashed out of the smoke, because if we rewind a little bit, one of the largest counterplays to AWPers that comes out when you're running a Phoenix a lot rather than the Sova is that you try and flash out of the smoke. And I want to try and explain this a little bit, because when you flash around a corner, imagine that cyber cage wasn't there. If you flash around the corner, then it takes a long time for that flash to pop. You see the full thing, like rotate around the corner, and it goes boom, bang in your face. But when you throw it through a smoke, you can time it so that you barely see the flash before it explodes. It is like a genuine pop flash from CSGO. And you can't really do pop flashes in this game except when you combo them with a smoke that you've already laid down. So that's a lot of what TSM likes to do. That's a lot of what teams like Envy like to do, who are copying the TSM kind of style of play, where Drone will try and flash through smokes a lot to push people off angles or to get really good bursts into sites. And it can be hyper effective if you're just staring at that smoke waiting for people to come through, which is a lot of the time. So Caboose is going to be facing the wall here, facing away from the smoke to dodge any flash that would come through the cyber cage. But Hazed has actually thrown a deep slow, and that slow has gone all the way to the bottom of A long, and their idea here is not to flash through and try and take really aggressive control over A long. Instead, what they're going to try and do is just challenge this AWPer, and Hazed is going to try and challenge the AWPer. He doesn't know which side he's on, though, because of the cyber cage, and as the slow finishes, I mean, Mame just peeks him and kills him. So I think that's a pretty dumb way of trying to flush out an AWPer. Not a big fan of that. And Caboose actually takes the peek as well, just to cover for Mame as he resets up on the angle, and he manages to get the pick on Drone, then he flashes, and then he walls just to stop anybody re-peeking him for the trade. Mame and Caboose drop back. Their job has been done. They found the first 2 picks. That's fantastic. They've also managed to kill the Sage, so there's no res potential even if they did have res available, and they've basically done their job. Unfortunately, Envy are a bit like TSM, and Mame just loves ego challenging angles on the AWP, and so they try and retake control over A long, and wardell's already posted up, so he's just like, yo, what the fuck, and kills Mame really easily. So that again is not a very smart play coming out from Envy, I think. Once you've already done your job of getting those first 2 picks, you can take much more passive angles on A. You can rotate Mame all the way up to heaven if you want, and you can take your players back off to everywhere else. You don't really need to rotate onto A. You're not anticipating a fast A hit. Now, again, we're going to see, I'm going to pull up the minimap here because even though Cutler and Sabrosa are just trying to see if they can find a pick on A, what's really happening here is that Wardell has taken the bomb all the way over to C because he can jump over tripwires, and so he's thinking that if they've managed to successfully bait players into rotating to A, anticipating a fast hit, now that the Oper is dead, then he might be able to get a free plant over on C, and they can play some kind of, if they catch a rotator when they're coming back, then maybe it'll just be a straight 3v3 retake instead of the 4v3 that they currently find themselves in. Unfortunately, it's going to be the Cypher Cam that I think spots him as he tries to go for this. And there's a tripwire there too. But I think it's really the Cypher Cam that stops Wardell from wanting to go through to this plan. And instead, they have to commit to this push onto A. The bomb is now miles away. And basically, as this round plays out, you'll just see that Envy played time. I mean, they just use the Brim ult to deny the plant and push it into a weird position. And then they peek with their Sage from A. And Akis gets the kill on the planter. So it's not an inspiring round coming out from TSM. Honestly, it's not that much of an inspiring round coming out from Team Envy either, but what it does illustrate is the play and the counterplay on A long when it comes to the Orbs. The classic play from the offense is going to be to flash through that cyber cage to take control of A long, but the defensive play to react to that is to have your own Phoenix push up deep and avoid getting flashed. So yeah, just as I explained there, they played the time. Team Envy's Brim used his ult to deny the plant, and then Akis peeks for the kill. So let's take a look at round 8 here, because they do a very similar kind of thing. It's again a double AWP defense coming out from Envy. They've got Calypso and Mame on the AWPs. Calypso is holding on the mid angle, and Mame is eventually going to go over to A after they've finished rotating people around, doing whatever they do. I think they're wondering whether or not they want to play towards C, but they eventually commit to taking A control, which I think is the right play from Envy. They played pretty well in the previous round. They just re-peaked an angle that they shouldn't have done. And let's take a look at what happens here. I want to kind of replay this first challenge in a bit of slow motion for you guys. If I can figure out how to do that, actually. Where is it? Playback, speed. This would be so much easier if I had an actual telestrator. Yeah, let's go for that. Nice, we get to hear Pocket in really slow motion, like he's high as balls. Okay, so here you can see that Wardell just challenges this position. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Mame and Calypso have swapped over. Normally, Calypso holds mid and Mame holds long, but they swap over this round. I don't really know why, but there you go. Maybe just so that Mame can get the angle on top of the box. Probably that's the reason. Anyway, Calypso is holding this classic angle, and Wardell basically jumps past the main angle that you would cover to hop on top of the box to take the angle. This is a super ballsy play from Wardell. It's so high risk, high reward. There isn't a res on his team as well, so if he loses this challenge, his team's at a disadvantage, whereas Team Envy does actually have a res now, albeit the Sage is on the other side of the map, so it's probably never going to get res, but still, really high risk, high reward from Wardell in this situation. No utility used whatsoever, and both of the Opers tag each other through the brick to knock each other down to 25 HP. So I'm going to put this back to normal speed, and you see that they're both on 23 HP. So they haven't actually done that much. I mean, I suppose that Wardell has pushed Calypso off the angle because he's scared of taking the re-peak, because there could be other players there as well. But yeah, not the most fantastic thing in the world. So TSM are going to challenge long because they know that they've pushed Calypso off that angle. And they push a couple of people into short here as well. And they're going to eventually run into a 3-2 split with A short, A long. A short and then a B to A hit. Now, the stream lagged here, so I can't tell whether Hayes jiggle peaked and then re-peaked the angle, or whether the stream just lagged and he stayed at this angle. But from what we can tell, it just looks like Hayes dry peaks into Mame here, when they know that there's been a double AWP setup running for Team Envy. They know that this is going to be the situation. And again, they've used zero fucking utility to push Mame off this angle, or to obscure him, or to flash him, or to do anything here. So again, this is just more blind, I don't know, like confident aim dueling coming out from TSM, but they're losing. Like they're getting picked by Mame, and good teams will do this to you. So I again think that that's not a smart peak coming out from Hayes. Caboose was hidden in that angle, and I think he'd already used his flashes or something. Obviously, you would want to try and flash out there if he had it available. Actually, that's an interesting question. Did he have it available? Because if he did, I mean, that's obviously, like, dumb to go for the raw peak again, but I wasn't paying attention. Oh, he does. He's got two flashes available. This is silly again from Caboose. This is pretty similar to Mummy re-peaking the angle. I mean, either Caboose stays here and just hopes that there's an A-long hit to try and buy intel, or he should try and flash out, I think, to catch anybody that's holding down here. But Wardell knows that Caboose likes to hold this kind of area, and he just blind peeks out. I don't think that Wardell's necessarily looking at where Caboose is looking from, but it's a pretty easy flick for one of the best Opers in the world. So Wardell finds that pick really easy on. Drone as well just faces into Calypso, and you've just got a shitfest of the Opers getting picks because no one is using utility whatsoever. Like, it's frankly kind of garbage from both teams here. There's no attempt to push the Opers off their position. Now, Sabrosa, in the meantime, if we take a look at the minimap, Sabrosa, once they actually got that pick, after they got picked in mid, Sabrosa has put down both of his smokes on this angle, and he has crept his way up and found the kill on Mummy. So Sabrosa has actually used some utility, has found some nice timings to be able to get in. And they've got now a bit of a short and B to A squeeze on the A point. That's the idea here. The problem is that they've taken so long with this that they can't really be sure where Team Envy's Cypher is. They don't know whether he's already maneuvered his way towards B. They don't know whether he's pushed Garage for intel. So Sabrosa can't really just commit to the A push. He could, but he's got to be a little worried about the guy behind him as well. So if we watch this from kind of the Sabrosa point of view, if we think about what he's going to be up to here rather than what these guys on A are up to, You've got to be a little... So Sabrosa goes and challenges... You have to see this on the minimap because it doesn't actually get shown on screen. But Sabrosa challenges Akis as Akis walls these guys up on short and then goes back to look for Sabrosa. It's a difficult position for Akis to be in, but I think he plays that pretty well. He just loses the aim duel. And then Sabrosa himself can either rush into A to try and... put the squeeze on as these guys break the wall, which I think would have been the correct play, but Sabrosa is worried that this Cypher has already like pushed up behind him or has already pushed from C and is like right behind him, so he doesn't just want to make a bunch of noise. Sabrosa thinks that the better play would be to watch for that flanker. I'm not convinced personally, but I don't think that there's necessarily one play that's a lot better than the other. It just comes down to Sabrosa's read of the game. So Sabrosa actually hangs around looking for this flanker, picks up an AWP for whatever reason as well, just thinking that he's going to be pushing from top garage, and Sabrosa ends up dying here to FNS. So I don't know about that. I would have liked to see Sabrosa push, but I feel like that's one of those analysis with hindsight things where you can't necessarily say that Sabrosa made the wrong play. I feel like Sabrosa played that round pretty well, and really it was like the ego challenges that fucked them early on in the round. Anyway, now they're in a 2v2 scenario, and Sabrosa has been unable to challenge. They've got to have some kind of idea of where Calypso is, because Calypso killed them previously, killed a player. They killed Drone, I think, previously from Heaven. And so Cutler dies, and then Wardell, for whatever reason, seems to think that the guy's playing in this angle. I think he thinks that Calypso was playing there and just wide swung for the pick instead of thinking that he's Heaven, because Wardell doesn't even look whatsoever towards Heaven. Maybe he's anticipating this Cypher player to be moving in and thinks that Calypso won't go for the repeak because Wardell will be holding the angle. I don't understand exactly what's going on in Wardell's head here. Maybe he's like thinking 2 steps ahead, but what it just looks like is that he walks in and dies to the guy in Heaven. There might be reasons why Wardell thinks that Calypso won't go for the repeak because he thinks that, you know, Wardell will be holding that angle after he showed himself at first. And maybe Wardell's like playing 3D chess because 3D chess, that's just fucking normal chess, isn't it? 4D chess, because he thinks that another guy's going to repeak him from bottom. But either way, the way that this round plays out is kind of atrocious from both teams in terms of them just challenging AWPs, like ego aim duels over and over again with very little utility used. So let's head into round 9 here. And again, Wardell is going to challenge on A long. And that's this has been like there have been ego challenges all over the place, and I really dislike this from TSM. But you've also got to think to yourself, like, what else can TSM really do? Now, they could just play rifles and use the flashes through smokes to try and take position, but their strongest asset historically has always been Wardell finding them these magical picks with their AWP. And if Wardell has somebody on the other side, like Mame particularly, but also Calypso's been finding some decent frags on the AWP too, then they tend to have a lot less success. And they don't have the strategic play to be able to fall back on. I mean, look at this. Wardell doesn't have any armor here. He's just going at a glass cannon AWP. And again goes for the exact same challenge that he did in the previous round, this time against Mame, whereas previously it was against Calypso. He jumps up before the trap can even possibly be popped here from Cutler, takes the peek, and yeah, it's a leg shot through a wall, but because Wardell doesn't have any armor, he dies. So that's the first, no utility used, Wardell just peeking an angle, and they die really early on. I don't know whether Wardell's a particularly emotional player that gets really like in his head about taking these aim duels, these ego duels. I don't know whether that's the kind of player he is. He seems like it from his stream and the way that he likes to pop off and like big himself up and stuff like that. He seems like a player that can really like play with a lot of confidence when he's on fire and gets himself, you know, really fired up. But here we're seeing the downside of that. Now they do smoke, they put the cyber cage down, they flash out of it. There's a counter flash that comes out from Caboose to try and retake this angle for Mame, which I like. Caboose and Mame playing really well down at A long to try and recontrol these angles. But all right, they've got themselves set up in position again here. Calypso is AWPing in mid, and they know that they love these double AWP setups. And I think it's just a little unfortunate from Drone that he drops down in this angle just as the wall comes up, but Drone ends up falling here as well. I'm not going to say that that's like bad play from Drone or anything like that. I don't think you can quite know that Calypso is going to be holding this mega tight angle just before the wall comes up. I think that's just unfortunate. But as it is, Calypso and Mame have found a lot of results, a lot of production out of this double AWP setup because TSM just keep facing them. TSM go for a B hit. Drone gets caught. They're now in a 3v5 situation. And Hayes and Cutler are going to try and clutch this, but they can't. I mean, I'm going to allow this round to play out because Hayes and Cutler make it seem like it's feasible. But when you have 4 players retaking, plus a flanker coming around from behind, it's just not possible, even if people hit the nicest kills possible. I mean, look at this. It's such a nice flank coming out from Cutler, even after he fails that first kill. And it's a great crossfire coming out from Hayes and Cutler too. They managed to make it a 2v2, but I just... you're not going to win these rounds most times. And I think that's the most you can possibly ask out of Hayes and Cutler, that they turn that into a 2v2 and get the 3 first picks. I mean, most of the time you are losing that round really early on. So, all right, the next round, as far as I remember, was an eco round, and we set up into round 11 here. And this is already looking pretty dreadful for TSM. It's 7-3. If TSM win the next 2 rounds, it's not that bad. But if TSM lose this round, I mean, they're going to be broken again, and it's going to be a 9-3 half. So TSM absolutely must win this. I mean, they'll be on a broken bye for next round. They're still going to buy up anyway, you know, because it's the last round. But okay, so this is a really important round for TSM. Let's take a look at how they play it. It's going to be the same kind of stuff coming out from Team Envy. This Phoenix and an Opers setup on A long. Cyber Cage goes down here for Team TSM. For TSM. Drone is going to flash out of the smoke there. The little flash that you just saw. But it pops without actually getting Mummy hit by it. So I want to try and like showcase why that's not exactly what TSM were going for. When you're trying to flash out of a smoke, you're trying to have it pop as early as possible. So you don't really want it to be seen and then pop. You're trying to get it so that it barely gets seen and then it explodes. So that anyone who's looking at this smoke would get flashed. And Mummy at that point there would have to either hide behind the brick thing in front of him or would have to retreat back to the previous angle. And honestly, what he would get Caboose to do is just flash as he gets out. As they've showcased, they understand how to play against this flash through a smoke idea that TSM have to push Opers off their angle. Which, incidentally, is so much worse than just running us over. But anyway, the flash comes through. It doesn't quite work out as TSM would like it. And Caboose throws the counter flash anyway. This counter flash stops anybody pushing through the smoke, through the cyber cage from TSM. So it stops you hitting A long with an aggressive rifle push. In the meantime, Cutler has got into this cubby kind of position, and he put the cam down here to try and cam Mame out of the position, or cam just for intel, or whatever the hell he was trying to do. Caboose does a good job of taking out the cam really early on before Cutler can get any value out of it. And now Cutler, as this cyber cage falls, is kind of stuck in this little cubby. It's not a good position for him to be in. Wardell just challenges, again, just a pure ego challenge onto Calypso, but he actually wins this one. And honestly, Envy have done a really good job at being able to win the majority of these AWP duels. Genuinely, Wardell will probably win the majority of these just raw duels if you give him the chance, because he's that good. I don't think that means it's a good idea, but he's good enough to be able to win them. So Calypso is going to get rezzed later on in the round as well, but I'm not going to comment on it when it actually happens, because there's a fight going on A long. But let's take a look at A long right now. Drone chooses not to try and flash Cutler out of position, but actually walls him out of position, which is kind of creative. I quite like that. But Mame and Caboose now do fully have control over A long. They jump over, get a bit of intel. Cutler just spots what's happening there, and they're kind of trying to back out of this situation. So let's take a look at what happens for the rest of this round. TSM have already kind of dry-faced an AWPer there. They dry-face another AWPer again here. So they like jumped Cutler out of position. He could have died to Mame. They push Drone into position, again with zero utility, and Mame gets the pick. Calypso's been walled and rezzed up. And now TSM is in a 4v5. Wardell just goes for a challenge where Calypso is peeking. They know that Calypso is probably going to be here, right? Because Calypso got rezzed back here. So where's he going to move to? Calypso's either going to be AWPing this angle, but he smoked it. So he's probably going to be rotating to this angle. Wardell, again, with just a pure ego challenge, gets killed by Calypso, who has the advantage in that angle 10 times out of 10. Wardell is good enough to win these fights sometimes, but you got to put more respect on your opponents. You got to use more utility than that. It isn't good team play whatsoever. They just dry peek AWPs repeatedly in this round. They're not flashing effectively. They aren't smoking out AWPers. They don't have the Sova to be able to drone or tag people, and their camming hasn't been useful to be able to cam AWPers off the angles either. The lack of Omen and Sova in their team comps really hurts them, because the Omen has an extra flash which you can, or like a blind, that you can occasionally use to take control, whereas Brim doesn't really have that. The Molly is not going to be effective at being able to push AWPers out of position. The smokes are also more effective from Omen because you're not using up one of the three that you have. They're on a cycle, they're on a cooldown, and the Sova is just so important for being able to push out AWPers from position. I think it's a must pick in this kind of AWPer meta, especially on a map like Haven. Maybe not when it comes to stuff like Split. I don't think that you get very much value out of it there. But when it comes to Haven, hell yeah it is. So let's see how the rest of this round plays out. FNS comes back in. The flash comes out of the top of the wall. They double peek. Haze goes down. It's only Sabrosa alive. Gonna use his ult, but he will die eventually. So, not great. Now, thankfully, TSM in round 12, when they are forced to play with more rifles because their economy is in shambles, they actually play much better. They end up winning this final round. Oh no, they don't win this final round, but they do a great job in this final round. So let's take a look at round 12 here. It's 8-3 for Team Envy. They've been losing ego duels repeatedly, but now they don't have enough money to take ego duels with the AWP because they just physically can't buy one. So instead, they go for more of a rifle hit. Calypso both has an AWP and a rifle here, I think. He's like cycling them around so that he can take some early peeks on B and then go back to a rifle if they have to retake somewhere. And let's take a look at what TSM actually do when they're forced to not take AWP duels. They have low armor. It's not a great buy for them, but they have 5 Phantoms, and they're just going to push A. And look at how much better this is now that they aren't suckered into taking the AWP battle. It's the exact same thing coming out from Envy. Mame on the angle. Caboose does not push up. He's just looking to counter flash the players that would play aggressively through smoke. And let's showcase what happens here. because you have to look at the minimap because the observers didn't quite catch it. But what they've done is these rifle players have put down the smoke, the cyber cage, as they normally would, and they have flashed through with drone, and this time they are pushing it with 3 players, with drone, with Subrosa, and with Cutler. They're not setting up for any kind of short play. They're not setting up for short control and Wardell to just take challenges down A long. They are actively pushing. They do get counterflashed because these guys pushing long are hugging the wall. And they know that this counterflash is going to come out from Caboose. They're going to check the close angle to make sure that he isn't there. And if he isn't there, then he's definitely going to be flashing here because that's what he's been doing all game long. So these 3 riflers that are pushing out here, Drone, Subrosa, and Cutler, they dodge this flash. Caboose doesn't see anything when he first peeks, so he's going to let Mame set up on the angle. And this shallower angle now, Mame sets up on it, but he's going to get triple peeked. Look at that. That's really nice play. That's how you do it. You push the AWPer off the angle with the flash through the smoke at the beginning, and then you make sure that you have riflers there to be able to actually trade the kill afterwards. Worst case scenario here, Mame takes one of them, but he's not going to take all of them. So that's great play by TSM. They get set up, Caboose is forced back as well, and they have all of the control over point A. This is obviously going to be an 8-4 half, isn't it? Flash through like another smoke, I guess. It's like through a wall. Again, it's not like the perfect timing for it, but it's better than if he had just flashed around the corner to start with. Except that they don't check Caboose. Oh, and Caboose just kills 3 of them. And now you're in a 2v2 scenario. And unfortunately here, Akis gets the peak and Subrosa goes down. Just a poor timing thing for Subrosa. And you're in a 1v2 with Hazed. And he really doesn't have any chance of taking this. So unfortunately, even though TSM had a great idea of what to do on that final round, they still make a large mistake and get punished for it. And this is one of the reasons, like, it's an early example of TSM just looking shockingly bad in this tournament. This PAX Invitational. And I was really surprised that they were able to beat Team Envy, and not at all surprised that they lost to the Sentinels, because they're just taking ego duels constantly, relying on Wardell to get the picks with the AWP, and if he can't manage it, if he gets shut down, then they don't seem to have, or at least didn't in this tournament, have the strategic backbone or the fundamentals of, like, double peeking angles and pushing Opers off and this kind of stuff. They were just taking 1v1 aim duels constantly. And that isn't the TSM that I've enjoyed watching for the past couple of months. This was a really bad showing from them. And I hope the TSM pick it up in the future, but I also hope that they add a strategic foundation to their play and experiment with more Sova, for example, getting played. And don't just rely on winning all of these aim duels against their opponents.